Blog Talk Radio.
Welcome, living beneficiaries, to the show for living beneficiaries, the House of Hidalgo show on the Estate Radio Network. Prepare for the most educational 60 minutes on all of radio with your host, Rick Hidalgo. The House of Hidalgo show can be followed on Twitter and Facebook by searching House of Hidalgo. Find the show on the web at www.therockofsalem.org. Sign up for the newsletter, and while you're there, take the 5-question survey to let us know what you think. The Estate Radio Network is part of the Blog Talk Radio family of networks and can be found at www.blogtalkradio.com/South Dakota DP. Join the show now by chat or call 619-639-4605. Don't forget to dial 1 to get in the queue. Here's your host, Rick Hidalgo! I wanted to talk a little bit with Gideon about the education system in America. Gideon works in the Waldorf system, and Gideon's got a lot of experience in this area, and he could really help to map out the not just the history of how we were dumbed down to the point where we are now, but also give us some remedy by helping us to crawl out of that dumbing down. And certainly Waldorf is one approach that a lot of people are finding success with in education. Me personally, I'm home educating 2 of my 6 children. We had a show just the other night on education. Education's a matter that's near and dear to my heart. Why? Because I was one of those dumbed down people myself. All right, I apologize for that. That will be edited out of the out of this conversation, obviously. But what happened there is Gideon just tried to call me on the other line, and so I'll be calling him in about 5 minutes. Until then, I wanted to tell you a little story, a little background for me, my awakening experience. It all kind of started for us in that I've always been a little bit of a, I guess, I don't know, conspiracy nut. I don't know what you want to call me. I never went over the edge. I've never been one of those people that thought that everything was a conspiracy. But what happened was I was a very spiritual person in my young years, and that led me to some deep understanding of the spiritual warfare that goes on around us. And so I started attending some different schools and different meetings, and those meetings led me down some interesting roads. And about the time that we went to have our first child, that would have been 1996. Would have been March of 1996. A year. Just short of a year to the date that we were married, my wife and I. Married in June of 1995 when we had our first child. She actually conceived on our honeymoon, one of those stories. And there's a million directions we can go from there, but I'm going to leave those alone, at least for tonight. And someday I hope to have my wife on and we can give our story, and it's quite interesting. But what happened was we had our first child, like everybody else does, in a hospital. And what happened was we had such a horrible experience where I was treated as if I was just kind of a sperm donor, that I couldn't handle that type of a situation anymore. We decided we were going to start looking into alternative birthing channels. And as we did so, we ran across a ministry called Home in Zion Ministries, which was out of the time, I believe, out of Texas, but there was a strong group that was gathering, gaining some wind in Florida, where we were located up in the northern part of Florida. Well, Home and Zion Ministries was pretty radical, no question about it. They had a lot of very, very radical Christian ideas, and I'm not saying that they were wrong, but they were radical. And we kind of got into that. We did perceive that there were a lot of bones within it, so we ate the meat. We threw away the bones, and we started to walk a road where we would home birth our own children. Now, of course, in the state of Florida, if you have a licensed midwife attending your birth, there are certain requirements that they have. They have to. They're obligated to perform certain things, certain duties. Allopathic type of duties. And we decided we wouldn't go down that road. We wanted to home birth them ourselves, which in Florida was even statutorily it was legal to do so. So we started having our own children, and that's when it all started. All of a sudden, the process of having children at home and having to figure out how to get birth certificates and all that kind of thing led us to one thing to another, to another, to another, open our eyes to the fact that there really was something going on. The birth certificate meant something. It meant too much. And led me eventually to where I am today. I'm going to go ahead and try to give Gideon a call now. He asked me to wait about 5 minutes. I think it has been about 5 minutes. So let me enter in the number here and try to give him a quick call. And we'll continue my story another night, hopefully with my wife on the phone as well. As it always works out better to have the one with the better memory on the phone. All right. I'm going to try to add Mr. Gideon Weick to the call to our show.
Hello.
Hello, Gideon. This is Rick Hidalgo.
Hi, Rick.
Did I give you enough time, sir?
Yeah, I'm fine.
All righty. Well, I want to let you know that we are live. I did a little bit of a monologue type of deal there for a little while, but we had a little confusion as far as days, and I guess that happens in these type of situations. I do apologize if I'm messing up your schedule in any way.
No, I'm adaptable.
All right. We intended to come on tonight and talk a little bit about education and specifically about the Waldorf system. But before we get into that too much, Gideon, could you tell us a little bit of a background on you? What woke you up to, to the education system and the world system that we're in today? What woke you up to it, and tell us a little bit about that story.
Well, it's quite simple. My own education woke me up to it. I mean, I was a normal American child growing up in the 1950s and going through the school system at that time, which was fine. I learned what I learned in the system. But when I got, into junior high and high school, when, within my own heart there was a longing for things of real substance, something that smacked of truth, I just found that I wasn't finding it, within the school system, except, occasionally I would have one teacher or another that was very inspiring, and it was always, they were talking about human ideal. They were talking about philosophy, even in, say, English literature and so forth, which was a particular interest of mine. Or they were full of life. So I had one English teacher that was deeply philosophical, and he was very inspiring. And I had a French teacher who was beautiful, full of joie de vivre, and she was the essence of life and joy. So these are the people that I gravitated to because they were scintillating human beings, and everything else just seemed to be flat. So the same thing I encountered in college. It wasn't alive, except again, when I would meet people and we would talk as human beings together. I actually in college went to college on a teacher's scholarship, and I had to drop out of that course because it was so deadening. There wasn't anything of real education in it to me. Well, anyway, my path then led me into spiritual work on an Eastern path for a while, and then it was on an esoteric Christian path. And it was during that time when I was really deeply working on spiritual issues that I came into contact with the philosophy that underlies Waldorf education. That was a very interesting experience because I was, in a room, and a teacher of mine came to me and handed me a book, and it was The Modern Art of Education by Rudolf Steiner. And okay, I'll read that. So I read it, and, nearly every sentence in that book was addressing the questions that I had had all through my life, and how I longed to be taught in that way that he was describing. So that led me on the path then to train as a Waldorf teacher, and then to function as a Waldorf teacher. So that's the short of it.
Right. Well, so what for people that aren't familiar with the Waldorf teaching style or the mechanisms within Waldorf, what separates Waldorf from your typical education?
Well, the fundamental thing is that it views the child as a spiritual being, and that this spiritual being is cloaking itself in the flesh for its own particular task in the world, and that we as teachers then are there to act as midwives to bring out the inherent genius that child is bringing from the spiritual world into its work in the world. So we can't, our task is only to help orient this spiritual being, this divine being, to its physical life and to the modern times that it's in. We're there to orient it. We're not there to impress upon it all the prejudices of our times. We are certainly there to inform the child in an age-appropriate way of what it is to be a human being now, so that they can take on their work, whatever it is that whatever their spiritual destiny has for them. But it's not for us to determine what that is. We can certainly read it, elements of it within the child, but we can't impose our own ideas on it. We just simply have to nurture what's there. So, it's a very, that's essentially it. This comprehension of the human being, bringing its divine gifts into the earth, and then finding its task that is prepared for it, him or her.
Right. Well, yeah, that's fascinating. So for those who, the majority of people who would listen to this radio show, that the majority of them are freedom type people who have come out of something. They've woken up to reality in many ways, but they may still be looking through the same goggles that were prescribed for them by this society. And as they look at education, they may be having a hard time placing what you're saying, in a classroom setting. Can you go into that a little bit?
Oh, I can. I was just trying to give you the thing that really sets the fundamental that sets Waldorf education off from most other systems.
Yes.
But yeah, so there are many aspects that are crucial to how we approach the child. I mean, for instance, one of the critical ones is that children develop in their consciousness through rhythmic stages. So that the consciousness of an infant, which is very, very dreamlike, is radically different from the consciousness of an adolescent. Anyone can see that. So that the powers of thinking aren't really developed in the infant, but the powers of movement are, and they're the infant is constantly in movement. If an adult human being would try to be in movement as much as a little child is, they would be terrible. They would be exhausted, very quickly.
Right.
A little child is in movement all the time. So Rudolf Steiner saw through his spiritual investigation of the development of the human being that the human being develops basically in 7-year cycles. So from 0 to 7, you have the child is in terms of their consciousness, and you can also see it reflected in the development of their physical body too. I won't go into that right now, but in their consciousness, again, it's very dreamlike, and those children learn by imitation.
Right.
Every parent who has their eyes open to the child around them sees that. You raise your arm, and every teacher in the kindergartens know this. You raise your arm and you're singing a song, and the children do that. They just imitate what is around them. So it's extremely important in those early years that what you surround the children with is worthy of imitation, and that's everything from the way that you walk, the way that you hold yourself, the way that you talk. Whether you surround the child with beauty and harmony, or whether you surround the child with discord and tawdriness or ugliness or something like that. So in those early years, for instance, we advise parents, and then when the child actually is old enough to be in preschool or in kindergarten, we surround them with a very warm, encompassing home life, with things that the child would imitate if matters were such as they were, say, 50 years ago when the mother was at home and extended family was around and people were working in the house, and the baby was there, the infant was there, and they were watching everything that was going on. I mean, the parents weren't there to entertain the child. The parents were there to carry on the tasks of daily life.
Right.
And the child learned to enter into life in that harmonious way, that life was practical, life was doing, and involving yourself in things. And there's many movements, whether it was stirring or washing walls or sweeping or any chopping wood, any of those things that actually helps the child to get a hold of their physical organism and to master all of its capacities through the archetypal movements that exist within the normal working that many of the technologies of today have usurped or supplanted. So, and I'm not a Luddite because I use a lot of these things myself, but for little children, the sweeping, that, as opposed to a vacuum cleaner, the sweeping, the movement of the sweeping back and forth across the center of the body and so forth actually unites the two sides of the body so that they can work together rather than work it's called homologously, which is making one movement in one side acting the same as the other side. It's called differentiation of the body. But all of these archetypal movements that the child would do early in life would help them to gain mastery over their physical body and allow them then to gain higher skills later on when they went into school. So we're seeing today, for instance, where the infant is not crawling or creeping much anymore, but they're in the jolly jumpers and they're in the walkers and the strollers and so forth, that they don't have this, or subsequently to that, that they're in the car and that all these machines are taking away the opportunity for them to do all these archetypal work activities, that they have problems in school.
Wow.
They can't sit still. They can't process things that they hear. Their eyes don't move fluidly and everything, because all these things are integrated in the systems of the body, the sensory systems of the body. So it's very important then for us in the Waldorf school that children are imitating, that they're working, that they're, in the kindergarten you'll see kids using saws and hammers, and they're actually making things, and they're doing, and they are not being entertained.
Right.
The entertainment that children do, or as some of the kindergarten teachers have said, that a child's play is their work, and their work is their play.
Mm-hmm.
So that it's so beautiful to see what the children take in from the world around them. They instantly turn into play. So when the teacher's away, there they are. Oh, they're going to play school, or they're going to you be the mom and you be the dad and I'll be the baby, and we're cooking dinner. They're reflecting everything that they've absorbed from the world around them. So that's this very important foundational phase of imitation that the child has, and in those years, and that those things are actually affecting them physiologically as their body is developing too, the things that they're taking in. And there's this magical time around 7 years old where it's called the change of teeth, where the child becomes school ready. And 7 years old is a broad label. It can be 6.5 to 7. It's somewhere around there.
Sure.
And you can see it because the children then, their memory becomes recall. It is I think all parents may remember, when they ask a 5-year-old or a 4-year-old, well, how did things go today? How was kindergarten? Or what happened over at grandma's house? The child will go, I don't know.
Yeah.
They don't remember unless you bring something out that was there. Or you say something, and then suddenly their memory is kindled. It's called the local memory, that they have. That is actually similar to primitive humanity and its development. That's why many of these altars and so forth were made, monuments made as stimulation of memory of events that took place there. So anyway. Now memory becomes recall, and the child is ready for school. They can actively recall things that they learned during the day. And then this period of time between 7 and 14 is one of where the child drinks in from the authority of the teacher, but not authority as authoritarian, but authority as someone who knows the world that they're entering into. And so, again, at this stage, the child is just drinking in whatever the adults, in this case it's the teacher, are informing them about the world, whatever they're bringing to them. So it has to be something that is imbued. The teacher has to imbue it with imagination, with liveliness, and with a penetration of the subject that understands how it's going to affect the child and how it plays into the human culture. So that's the next phase. It's from imitation, it comes into this time of authority, and then when you get into the 14 to 21, we call that kind of the judgment years, where the child is developing their own judgment capabilities.
Okay.
And they look upon the teacher not so much as an authority, but as someone who should be an expert in their field, so that they can actually show them the more complicated workings of things, and that the student can then use their newly, not newly developed, but the qualities of thinking and judgment that have been built upon what they did during the last 14 years in those earlier stages. But this period that I've concentrated on between the ages of 7 and 14 is the elementary school period, first grade through 8th grade. And this is a time when we say the child is an artist. So everything that we do in a Waldorf school is permeated with art. So that's every form of art. So it'll be drawing, it'll be painting, it'll be movement and dance and rhythm. It will be that arise out of folk traditions. It'll be clay modeling, beeswax modeling, drama, et cetera, et cetera. And all the subjects that are coming are woven then into a whole artistic fabric that the children participate in. Because in that way, if they participate in something artistically, it becomes theirs. If it just remains as intellectual knowledge, it's abstract. But when you make it practical, and they can see, say, for instance, how math works out in rhythms, you do your fractions through movement and that sort of thing, that they see it's practical. And also that math then is something that is inherent in music. Right. Not only is math inherent in music, but it's also inherent in all the forms of nature, because you find geometry permeating the whole of nature. And suddenly they see that, one aspect of life, say, the math I'm doing on this page right here is related to the trees that are growing in the forest. It's a mind blower.
Right.
When the children really see that, they see how magical all this stuff is, that the world is one, and that our knowledge of the world then is taking the unity of the world and breaking it down into separate departmental pieces, yet in the comprehension of the whole thing, it is one. And they get that experience artistically.
That's fascinating, Gideon. It really is, because, having done some study on the history of education in this country, until the Europeans came here and started the one-room schoolhouses and really kind of screwed up everything, the indigenous people, this is exactly how they taught, isn't it, Gideon?
Well, I would say that it has a lot of similarities to that. You want for instance, let me give a for instance on this. When we teach the alphabet to the children, we teach the child to read from their own writing. So they learn to write first before they learn to read.
Wow.
Which is organic, right? That's the way things go. Anyway, so the way that we teach the letters is through imagination. That the letters are abstract; they don't have any connection to anything unless you, as a teacher, imaginatively connect them to something, and you look for some reality. There is reality to that. If you go back into the evolution of the alphabet, you see that they were pictograms, early on, and that in fact, like the letter A that we have, was inverted, and it was the head of an oxen, which was apis, or alpha, and the Greek and so forth. And but we so that the earlier the older the ancient civilizations saw that their alphabets actually arose from the world around them. So we don't go back and take the ancient pictures, but we will take something like, okay, if we're taking the letter B, we'll look to see, well, what in the experience of the world, because the child is basically united with the world. They're very much one with the world, and it's only a gradual process by which they individualize out of the whole.
Sure.
So and they're very much one with nature. So if you go and say, well, look, see this bee here is like the butterfly, and you'll see the two wings of the butterfly and the bee,
sure,
and so forth. And the child will see that, and they'll say, oh, butterfly. I mean, you'll have a poem or a song or something that goes with that. Or, what were some of the other ones I used? S is a serpent. And you'll have a story. And usually we at least what I did was I took a lot of the old fairy tales, like the Grimm fairy tales and so forth, which are full of all kinds of archetypal pictures, and which most people don't understand today because it's done in the ancient dream language that the young child understands, because they still are living in a dream before the intellect awakes. So this dream language of the fairy tale is very much akin to the way a child thinks.
Wow.
And I mean, that's a whole subject I would love to get into at some time, fairy tales, and just revealing that this is dream language, folks. It's not everyday experience that you would normally have, but you have to get into the dream language of symbols that are portraying archetypes within the human being. Anyway, but that's the way that we approach the teaching of reading, is again through their own writing. But from imagination, the imagination that connects the letters to the world that the children know is real, because they're one with it, right? So once they have all that, and then they start to write with all these things, and the teacher will be writing things on the board, and they'll be doing it and repeating all these sounds and everything. And it comes from this oneness I was trying to illustrate. This oneness of the world is how all these portions of knowledge or these skills come to us as individual aspects of that oneness. So that's what reading becomes. And the child, doesn't have an intellectual understanding of this, but they have a soul and experience and a physical experience of it too. That confirms in them the goodness of the world and the oneness of the world. So that's an aspect that is, I think, remarkable in Waldorf education.
Yeah.
We call it teaching the whole to the part, and that's the way also that mathematics will be approached, from the whole to the part. So instead of synthetically, 1 + 1 is 2, we'll say, well, boys and girls, look, we have 2 here. Now 2 is 1 and 1. Or you can say, like, 4 is 2 and 2, or 3 and 1. So there's various solutions to it, not just one. So one is synthetic, where the pieces equal the whole. The other one is analytic, where the whole is broken up into its pieces. So that's the way we'll approach mathematics with the young child. And it actually develops analytical thinking, which is a much touted capacity today in science. But most scientists, I can't say most, the way science is taught is synthetic rather than analytic. So you're taught to, well, if you mix this and you mix that, you're going to get this. Rather than, let's see how this came about, in a phenomenological way. So, and that's when we get into the sciences, but that's later on.
Wow.
Anyway, that's another aspect. Hold apart is another aspect of Waldorf education too.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'll tell you what, Gideon, if you'd like to get a glass of water or fluoride if you choose not to filter it, we're going to take about a 2-minute break and we'll be right back.
Okay.
Do you have hopes, dreams, and goals but don't know how to reach them? Do you wonder how you could do differently to achieve greater success at home or at work? Do you feel like something is holding you back from enjoying your life to the fullest? Are you fed up with status quo and ready for real and lasting life change? Are you wanting to start a business or expand an existing one? If the answer to any of these questions is yes, then you are ready for life coaching with Mr. Attitude. Mr. Attitude will stretch and grow you and take your life to a whole new level of success by equipping you with the tools to help you to accomplish more in less time, get and keep your priorities in line, gain greater happiness and joy, face your fears, plan for success, be more assertive and confident, overcome negative stress, deal with negative thinking, set goals you will achieve, and more. Mr. Attitude specializes in results producing, life strategy coaching for the personal side of your life, small business coaching for those who want to start a small business or build a stronger small business, train the trainer coaching for those who aspire to become a motivational professional speaker. Call today and reserve your appointment with greater success. 605-450-1955. That's 605-450-1955. Or email Bob at MrAttitudespeaks.com. That's MrAttitudespeaks.com. Mr. Attitude is committed to your success. Are you tired of going back to the local store for those common household items you can never remember to pick up? Maybe like me, you find it just more convenient to shop from your PC. Well, there's a new store in your neighborhood that ships your everyday needs to your door. Go to 425store.com and experience the power and service of a small family-owned business. That's 425store.com. Experience the power. All right, folks, we're back on the House of Hidalgo show. This is your host, Rick Hidalgo, on the Estate Radio Network. And I am on here with Gideon Weick. He is, of course, an educator in the Waldorf philosophy in the great state of Minnesota. And we talked the first half of the show about all types of aspects of the Waldorf philosophy. And Gideon, you mentioned that you'd like to take some time on fairy tales. If you'd like to take the remainder of the time, you certainly can.
Well, I mean that's a long subject. The fairy tales just basically. I'm getting an echo, so it's kind of.
Oh, sorry. I'll mute myself. Go ahead.
Okay. The fairy tales, as I mentioned, are speaking in a dream language. Carl Jung would call it archetypes that are there for the whole of humanity. And there's been a lot of work, with people that have done dream analysis and that sort of thing. There's lots of opinions on it. But when you take some of the traditional stories, such as Cinderella or Snow White and those stories, they are talking about, in this dream language, the elements within one human being. So all the different personalities that are in the story are actually aspects of yourself, such as you might have in a dream. So if we take Snow White, for instance, and look at some of the elements in there, we see that there is this blossoming soul, you might say, which is Snow White, innocent and beautiful. And there is the stepmother, not her true mother, but a stepmother that is there who was the epitome of beauty at one point. But now there's this new element coming up. So you have the old confronting the new, and there's always inertia within the old to resist the new and to destroy it, in point of fact. And then there's a mirror. And what is a mirror? Well, a mirror is actually reflective consciousness, where you're able to reflect back upon yourself, which is something that is developed in the course of a child's growing up. They don't immediately have reflective consciousness. It comes in around the age of 10, begins around there. But so I'm not going to go through the whole story. I'm just going to bring out some of the elements. So you have, the three temptations that come to Snow White. And by the way, Disney adulterates this fairy tale because of the way, I think he leaves out one of them. But anyway, so she's, the stepmother tried to destroy her, but the hunter couldn't do it, and took the heart of a deer instead and brought it back, and that he had to pay the punishment for that. But she then comes upon the house of the seven dwarves, and it's in a dark wood. All of these are very archetypal things. The house in the dark wood. Dante has it, the dark wood in his Divine Comedy. It's again a classic archetype. So the dark wood basically is, coming into, and the house in the dark wood is coming into your physical body. And the seven dwarves are seven archetypes within the physical body, or some would say there's seven archetypal organs within the physical body. And if you were something of an esotericist, you might say it's the chakras in the physical body. But anyway, they are forces within one's physical being. And, she's not to open the door to anyone or let anyone in when they go out to work. So the witch comes then and attempts 3 times to gain control over Snow White. And the first time is with a hair comb, and it's a poisoned hair comb. And it's a pretty, the witch comes up and says, pretty things to sell, pretty things to sell. And Snow White, with her powers of sympathy, which are soul powers, is very attracted to it, and is very believing, very innocent, very trusting, as all children are. And she takes it and puts it in her hair and immediately falls into a faint. And when the dwarves return, they see that she's in that condition. They take the comb out of her hair and she recovers. Then in the second one, it's a girdle. I think it's a girdle of some type. I think there's another term for it. But anyway, same thing happens again. It's a very beautiful thing, and she's convinced that it's great. And the disguised witch, or disguised queen as a witch, comes in and tightens it so that she can't breathe at all, and she falls down and passes out. And the dwarves come back and save her again. So then the third one is the poisoned apple, which is only 1/2 is poisoned. And, oh, it's just so beautiful to behold. And she says, the dwarves had warned her each time, look, don't answer the door.
Right.
And anyway, she does. And she says, no, I've been told not to do it. And the witch is saying, oh, but look, it's fine. She takes the bite out of the unpoisoned side. And so Snow White thinks it must be good. So she takes a bite, and as soon as she takes a bite, the piece lodges in her throat, and she falls down as if dead. Well, the seven dwarfs can't revive her, and she's, taken for dead. And she's put into a coffin and taken away, later to be revived by the charming prince. And the apple is coughed up, and she's okay. So, but what I want to say about this is that these three things are interesting, is that the one attacks her through her nervous system, which is, represented by the comb and the hair on the head. So the head is the center of our nerve sense awakeness. So that passes. And then the attack is on the rhythmic system, which is the breathing and the circulation, which is caused by this tightening of it, and so you can't get any circulation or rhythm, and that's relieved again by the dwarves. And the third one attacks the human being more deeply, poisons the human being more deeply, deep down into the metabolism itself. Within the other two are outside. This one is interior now because of the apple that she's actually taken in. And that can only be revived by the prince. And the prince is, if Snow White is the soul, the prince is representative of the ego. And it's without gender in this thing. It's just that the soul is receptive or feminine towards the divine spiritual being, the divine spark, or the ego of the human being, not the small ego that gets us into trouble, but the one that is the image of God. And that comes along and rescues the soul in the end. So this type of archetypal picture is something actually that the children carry within them, deep within their hearts, deep in the treasure chest of their unconscious, now that they are within the earth. And when you bring these stories to them, it's like a memory. It's like reminding them of who they are, and also reminding them of the dangers that are here if you get tempted into one misleading path or another. So that's again, these fairy tales were called household tales, and they were always told to children, traditionally, century after century after century, and they were this fundamental instruction that was there from the home life. And so, in a Waldorf school, we recognize how valuable these are. Real fairy tales. You can actually make up a real fairy tale if you understand how the human being's put together from a spiritual point of view. But most of us aren't that capable. But there's so many of these household tales or fairy tales that come from all different traditions, including from the Asian fairy tales. But those are very different. You really have to listen to what you're dealing with there. Or the Native American. And there's some fascinating ones in the Native American because they utilize very strongly the animal element, and the animals all represent different aspects of soul capacities within the human being. So this is, again, working with the dream language that children understand prior to them gaining discursive reason, which is something that they can mimic when they're younger, but it's not a organically developed capacity in the younger years. Typically, it begins around the age of 10 and begins to flower in adolescence.
Gideon?
Yeah.
You're convicting me to the core, brother. This is just amazing stuff that you're talking about, and having been someone who was raised, and I can say emphatically raised, on the video versions of these Disney things, that these fairy tales, boy, I've been missing out on a whole lot, and so have my kids. Could you, for the others that are like me, and I know there are a lot of others like me that have probably never heard the true story of, when I say true, I'm talking about the original version of any of these fairy tales. Can you give us maybe a top 3 must read to your kids?
You know what? Well, I mean, that one, the Snow White, is fundamental, and Belle is fundamental. But ones that I find totally fascinating are ones like the 12 Dancing Slippers, the 6 Ravens. These are all in a anthology of Grimm's fairy tales. Oh gosh, I wasn't fully prepared for this.
Sorry,
I would have my Grimms with me right here. No, there are. Let's see what else. Oh, Iron John. Let's see. I'm trying to remember my favorites now.
Well,
I love the Russian fairy tales.
Oh, okay.
The Russian fairy tales are fantastic.
Because Gideon, I gotta admit to you, I'm a very heavily TV'd guy. Growing up, I guess that was the pastime. I guess my parents just, and I'm not blaming them, but I'm just saying I spent a lot of time in front of the TV, so I got the pardon my French, but the bastardized version of pretty much everything. How about Aesop's fables? Are those?
We use those in second grade for the children. For the kindergartners and for the first graders, we use fairy tales. And also for the second graders, we continue with the fairy tales. Fairy tales are pretty much universal. They're even used, for instance, when you go and you do hospice work. And for sick people, you come and you tell them a fairy tale. And then they're taken into this wonderful imaginative world. It's not fanciful, you guys. It actually is describing things that go on inside of you.
Wow. Yeah, just ignore that. Go ahead.
Okay. And you listen, and even adults, if you sit there with an uncritical mind and you just listen to the fairy tale, you'll be brought into a wonderland. Now, what is also unique about Waldorf schools is that we don't read them fairy tales. We tell them fairy tales. So the teacher has to read and prepare the fairy tale in such a way that they can retell it out of the oral tradition. And it is such a beautiful thing when you're up there telling a fairy tale. What I like to do, actually, and I taught 4th grade last year, whenever I would tell a tale, I would turn the lights off and light candles around the room, and the room would just go, whoa. It would be just dead silent. They knew it was time for a story, and they would do anything for a story. And then, sometimes the stories are 15 or 20 minutes long, and if I found a really good one, and I have on occasion that's been quite long, they have sat there and listened to an oral fairy tale for 40 minutes without a peep.
Wow.
And what's really beautiful is you look at their faces when you're telling it, and their eyes are wide open and their mouths are wide open, And you know they're listening to your words, but they aren't there. They're in the fairy tale that you're telling.
Sure.
They're in the imagination. And then when you finish the fairy tale and you extinguish the candles and turn the light back on, there's this sigh that takes place. They go, like it was just the best meal ever. Wasn't that a good fairy tale? You know, it was like, that was so satisfying. But then it doesn't end there. But what we do after that is that the children will then, the next day, after they've had a chance to sleep on it, is that they will then draw pictures out of the fairy tale, and they will write about the fairy tale.
Wow.
So they actually use their skills in bringing the imaginative inner visualization, the imaginative pictures of the fairy tale that are carried within their thinking consciousness. They actually are able then to take those out and then to bring color to it, or to bring like beeswax form to it, or to write about it also.
Fascinating stuff. That's great. Like I said, you deeply convicted me there. That's fantastic.
Well, you're welcome. Let me give you another fairy tale story. So I then told a story in 6th grade out of the Islamic tradition, and there are many good stories that are there. And when you're in 6th grade, it's a different ball of wax than it was when you're in 1st or 2nd grade, and you're dealing with other thinking elements within the child. But it was one of these out of a collection from Indira Shah. It was about a goat and I think it was a rabbi or something was in there. A rabbi in an Islamic tale. I don't know. But
that's why there was a goat there too.
Yeah, the goat, right? The goat thing was spread. But anyway, no, and the story just didn't work. It wasn't right. It wasn't right for them. And when I got done, the class, who oftentimes would applaud after I was done with the story, they didn't applaud. They looked at me, and the one little girl says, "Mr. Weick, that one didn't work."
Oh, boy. Well, I mean, what you're saying, Gideon, is really revolutionary. I mean, because most of us are still looking through these goggles that we've been prescribed by these government schooling, or as a good friend of ours says, government fooling institutions. And
we call them mental institutions.
Yeah, I can second that. So you know what you're saying here, while it's very elementary in concept, is world shaking, because you're dealing with things that are, well, first of all, they're taboos in the world of the government schooling. How do you get along with government schooling, by the way? All these statutory, these crazy statutory things that they have on schools. How does Waldorf get along with that?
Well, we aren't really influenced by it much at all. I mean, there's, they want us to do testing, and we do testing only really for the parents' sake, because parents are wringing their hands about whether their child is going to make it in Harvard. But and I don't say that to belittle parents. I mean, I know, especially when you've been brought up in the society that we're brought up in, which is a very competitive society, where intellectual skills are prized far above practical and social skills. They want to make sure that their child is reading at a certain age. They want to make sure their child understands a certain amount of math at a certain age and so forth. Although every child develops according to their own pace, and a teacher needs to be aware of that. So with the public school system, we really don't have much involvement at all, except that we do testing in 7th grade, so that when they graduate from 8th grade, if they're going into a public school, they'll know whether they want to go into advanced courses or whatever, or if they need to do some additional tutoring to get them up to snuff on something. They do that. However, when we're preparing them for something like the Iowa Basics or another test like that, we approach it in a very creative way. Because you explain to them, okay, boys and girls, you haven't ever done any of these things where you fill in these little dots,
Yeah.
And this test is all about filling in these little dots, because if you get one of those dots wrong, whether you know the answer is right or not, you got the answer wrong. So you got to make sure you get the dots right. So we practice that. My approach to it is giving them playful examples throughout the upper grades of what these tests are like, so they get used to it, because they haven't had all this testing. But we test them, but the tests that they do are more in their everyday work, and it isn't compared to the next person. We don't do any grades,
right?
But the child knows, because they're always looking at what the other children are doing, and we have intimate conversations with the parents in the upper grades from 6th grade onward. The child is involved in those conversations, in those teacher-parent conferences. And the other factor in this is that in a Waldorf school, and this is significant, in a Waldorf school, the teacher ideally stays with the class from 1st grade to 8th grade. So, the children that I'm teaching now in the 5th grade, I've had since 1st grade, and we know each other. And I know what their capacities are, and I know what support they need, and that support has been, being given all along. And we develop a warm, familial type of relationship. Not only the children and the teacher, but also the teacher with the family too.
Wonderful. That's wonderful, because the thing that I object to the most, and the reason why I just went through all the hoops that I went through to try to avoid these statutory, so-called statutory obligations, is here in South Dakota they want you as a homeschooling parent, which I am, to facilitate a standardized test in 3rd grade. And my issue with that is my teaching style is different in that I don't prioritize things quite the same way as the standardized test would, because they teach the test. So so what happens is they may look like they're behind, and then as they test further up into the system, they'll look like they're tremendously ahead. So that's where I take issue with the standardized test, and that's why I asked that question.
Well, I think it's very important. The standardized test is basically testing intellectual knowledge, and for us, if we look upon the child's development as a gardener would look upon a garden, and you have to prepare and cultivate the soil first. Before you plant the seeds. So we're working to make sure that the child's imaginative capacities are nurtured, through all the art, through the imaginative stories and so forth, and that their social social harmony is there. It's something that we work with very strongly in the school, that we say developing the personality of the class. So the children become like a family. They aren't all the same, and there certainly are squabbles, but we get through it. And there's, compared with what I've recently seen and posted myself on social networks, there's some pretty difficult social consequences taking place in public schools, even down into the kindergarten, where police are coming in and hauling off, a 5-year-old. It's crazy. They don't understand children anymore, apparently. Anyway, there's a lot of factors that go into children's behavior, which is, of course, another good hour and a half discussion.
Sure.
But we really work with that every teacher works with that in the classroom to bring about social harmony. And if a child's having difficulties, to see what are the cause of those difficulties, because behavior isn't always an attitude problem. Behavior can be that the child is very uncomfortable in their body because they haven't really successfully integrated what we call the sensory integration. The primitive reflexes of their infancy and so forth can be interfering with their learning capability and with their social connections. And a lot of people don't know that. And you've got to help, because the children, and they're having this difficulty because they haven't gone through those basic developmental movements when they were little. And so we're doing, especially in the lower grades, we're doing a lot of movement with the children, making sure that these basic reflexes are what's called inhibited, but that they are integrated within the whole body, and that they become the postural reflexes, so that you can have fluid eye movement that's going to allow you to read properly without the eyes jumping all over the place, so that you can hear with a focused hearing rather than a peripheral hearing, where you're hearing all the outer sounds more than the person that's standing in front of you, or that your tactile or your sense of touch is integrated, so that when someone bumps up against you, you don't think that they did it on purpose, and you turn around and slug them, or something like that. Well, but these are real things. Children have these issues, which are that they can't sit, they can't stand. Their posture is that they haven't got control of their it's called proprioceptive and sense of balance. Those senses, they're not in, those aren't matured in them, and therefore they're very uncomfortable. So they have to be constantly in movement in order to feel comfortable. ADHD is, as the originator of the term, right before he died, said, is a fictitious disease.
Right.
And it's basically ADHD, from my experience. There are a couple of different factors coming into it, including allergies, food allergies, lack of rhythm in the life, too much media input, which causes disturbances in the nervous system and in the whole sleep life of the child, and these primitive reflexes, which should all be integrated within the first 3 months, or at most the first 9 months of a child's life, if they've gone through the proper or the normal developmental movements. And so a teacher needs to be aware of these things so that they can identify what it is that is in the way of the child realizing the joy of life and the wonder of learning.
Yes.
It shouldn't be a chore. It shouldn't be an onerous task for the child.
Right. Well, I'll tell you what, Gideon, I'm honored to have had you come on to this program. I apologize again for any confusion that we had there, but we did make it up here, and we have at least an hour of audio that we'll be sharing with all our friends, and I just want to thank you again for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk about something that I love.
Absolutely, and we can tell you love it. So for Gideon Weick, this is Rick Hidalgo. This has been another episode of the House of Hidalgo show on the Estate Radio Network. We thank you all for coming. God bless all and stay safe.
Bye-bye.